Brother, we have a lot to peel through, not only the New England Patriots and the coaching staff, but as we mentioned, the Super Bowl is set, and it's going to be Philly and Kansas City, Super Bowl 59. Philly rolled Washington 55-23. And what can we say about Saquon Barkley that hasn't already been said, Jay?
Well, it's just unbelievable. And I know that we're going to get to the Super Bowl, and it's a rematch from a couple of years ago. But unless I'm mistaken, Saquon Barkley was not walking through that door for the Philadelphia Eagles when these two teams played a couple of years ago. But it really is just unbelievable. He had a quote, I don't remember specifically, but talking about, yeah, we are going to be that team that's going to win football games running it down your throat. 229 yards rushing, 7 rushing touchdowns for the team. I don't mean 229 for Saquon, for the whole team. And I know we're going to talk about the AFC, but Josh Allen can't run a sneak like Jalen Hurts. Nobody runs that assisted quarterback sneak like the Philadelphia Eagles. But I will say, I said this on the huddle yesterday on oddchuck.com. If I hear the term brotherly shove one more time, I felt like I was watching like the Nickelodeon slime channel listening to brotherly shove.
It is, it's annoying, but it's amazing how everybody knows that it's coming and yet they can't stop it. Now in the AFC game, Chris Jones was a part of stopping one of those Josh Allen runs, but I know we're going to get to it. And I know that the Saquon Barkley and the MVP stuff, but I love the Philadelphia Eagles for the reason you just said, Jason Anik, and that is in an era of tight pants and quarterbacks and wide receivers and, let's go out there and daintily play the game because we want to whiz the ball around all over the place. It's nice that somebody stands up and knocks your dick in the dirt. That's we did a drill called D in the dirt when I was an offensive lineman where you learn to hit and then you're kind of extending your hips through the block, right? My old offensive line coach would be like, I'm going to tell who the virgins are just with this drill. And they were called D in the dirt. And you could, honest to God, you could tell the people who have never thrusted their hips into anything. I say that jokingly, but Philadelphia is all in on it. And in an era where everybody thinks you have to have the big wide receiver, not that Philadelphia doesn't, by the way. In fact, they probably got 2 of them that are pretty good and a tight end that's underrated, but nevertheless, I love it that there's still a team, Jay, that is out there that just wants to punch you right in the mouth and run it down your throat. Tell you they're doing it and then go doing it. That's badass.
Oh, and with Vic Fangio's unit backing you up, we've talked a lot on this program about the wide receiver market correction and how we don't necessarily think wide receivers going to get 25, 30, 40 million a year. But it wasn't necessarily in the context of the running backs. And I think Dalvin Cook, who's James Cook's brother or cousin, pushed out a tweet, 20 million a year for James Cook, right? Now, you can be sure Philadelphia is glad they paid Saquon, but really just unbelievable to think. And if Philadelphia does realize this championship and does beat Kansas City and get in the way of that three-peat with rushing and defense like this, be super impressive.
Oh, it'd be fantastic. I know that we're going to get there, but right now I'm leaning Philly. We got a long time to go, but right now I'm leaning Philly to block Kansas City from getting the three-peat because I think there are some very particular matchups that are problematic for Kansas City and in the way that Philadelphia has built their team. But let's get to Kansas City, Jay, because they beat Buffalo once again, 32-29, wash, rinse, repeat. Here we go. Kansas City beats Buffalo, and everybody is going to pump up Josh Allen. Oh, what more can Josh Allen do? He's 0-4 against this guy. He's the only quarterback, I think, in head-to-head playoff battles who has not won a game yet against Pat Mahomes on the other side.
Well, and I think, excuse me, it was Rashee Rice who had a microphone in his face, and they said, asked him something about Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, and he's like, yeah, Patrick better than Josh. And it wasn't even joking around. It just kind of is what it is. But I do think coaching has a lot to do with it. I could go on and on about Andy Reid, right? He didn't win the championship as head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles, but he built that organization and built that program so Doug Peterson could. What he's done in Kansas City is just unbelievable. And Buffalo Bills, I could do a whole program on how sorry I feel for their fans. And how I thought there were a lot of just bad offensive play calls and bad moments. We talked earlier about the quarterback sneak. If you can't run it like Philly, why are you getting up there so confident as if you can? And we talked about it on last week's show about running off guard, right? Yeah. How predictable is that going to be, right? If you're taking it straight up over center and you're doing sort of where it's the push, I'm not going to say you-know-what push.
No.
But if you're doing it like that, there's very little ground to gain. It's a straight shot, whereas Josh Allen, if you're going to go off guard or bounce, how about going to the right? Or there's got to be some creativity there. And another thing, too, from the Buffalo standpoint, this chasing points and going for 2 points, right? You can cut it to 21-17, but early in the game, you go for 2. Then you get a touchdown early in the third quarter and go for 2 again, just chasing. So you end up 1 point instead of up 3 late in the game. It matters. I don't understand why we're chasing points early in games. I just think Buffalo, I'm not suggesting I believe Sean McDermott should lose his job, but I do believe they need different leadership if they're going to get over this hump.
They need a major change, and it's got to be on the table. Like if you're the general manager, or even if you're the owner, Terry Pagula, who's building a stadium. I know that his wife has been ill. If you're Pagula, by the way, you're also, I think, in your early 80s. So, the clock on earth is ticking like other owners have dealt with. Robert Kraft, Jerry Jones, see some of those guys that are older owners. And if you're Pagula, you have to ask yourself, what can I do to get this team over the hump? And is the mix wrong? Because you're right. At some point, when do you just look at the head coach and say, thank you, you've done an unbelievable job, but you can't break through the glass ceiling. And I got to shake it up for my fans to try to give them a little confidence that someone is in here that can do so.
Yeah, and Dalvin Cook, the older brother of James Cook, right? So James Cook, 13 carries, 85 yards, 6.5 per carry. That 4th down touchdown run, extending the football, one of the best big game plays I think I've ever seen in my life. Let the guy feed him a little bit, right? I think Buffalo had paths to victory in that game, despite whatever anyone wants to say about the officiating. And I just think they missed the boat. Joe Brady was an improvement over Dorsey, but I still think there's just room for improvement. And the Kincaid catch or whatever, I don't want to even talk about that play, but Josh Allen talked about opportunities for Kincaid during the season. He feels like maybe he let his guy down a little bit. I think he's right. Kincaid had a lot of hype after last season. So I think there's been a lot of sort of swing and misses out of this Buffalo team, and sort of getting a little bit comfortable being sort of the stepchild here.
They need a Saquon Barkley is what they need, friend. I mean, really, they need a compliment. Look at what Baltimore did for Lamar Jackson. They went and got Derrick Henry, and this year almost set a team rushing record. Well, James Cook to me is not a 350 carry a year back, and then you have to turn around and ask him for maybe 100 more carries in the postseason. Like, I know Derrick Henry is built for that. I've now seen that Saquon is built for that. And there were other teams that went out and got free agent running backs like Josh Jacobs. If Green Bay were here, to me, Jacobs is a guy who can get up to 400 carries and still be okay. I think Cook's one of those dudes who still needs to kind of get there, but they've also got to commit to it being more than just Josh Allen's going to rip open and show his Superman, underneath his shoulder pads. They've got to get more dynamic on offense.
Well, and if we flip it over to the Kansas City side, if you compare the wide receiver rooms, even though Patrick Mahomes may not need it, kind of like Tom Brady in the past, that's a good looking deep wide receiver room. Kareem Hunt from the same draft as Patrick Mahomes. It reminds me of the Patriots a little bit. Doesn't necessarily matter who's playing running back. I really hate to say it, but Kansas City, whether it's making the play in the big moment or Patrick Mahomes converting 6 first downs with his legs, or they are playing different now that's a postseason. And say what you want about the close games in the regular season, but gosh, they're built to win, and winning is paramount. And you don't always have to jump off the page every day, because if they find a way to win this 3rd straight Super Bowl, and the only loss this entire year when they tried to win was week 11 at Buffalo, I mean, hats off, blown away.
I think the other thing too is when you look at Buffalo, yes, there's the glass ceiling, but how are people going to improve around them? So now Buffalo, in a way, being number 2, has the league chasing them as well as Kansas City. And, you mentioned Kansas City, and you and I lived this as Patriot fans, right? They weren't the best version of themselves, but they were good enough to be able to win. And how many times did they played a Super Bowl without Gronk, for God's sake.
Yes, great point.
Like that kind of stuff, but still found a way to get there, found a way to be competitive, and at times won those games. That's Kansas City. They're not the best version of what they've ever been, but their version right now is still really good to go win a championship.